Welcome to Truman's Town Hall with your host, Matt Truman.
Hello. This is Matt Truman. Thank you for downloading this episode. Thank you for sharing with a friend. Today is November the 4th, 2021, and the election is over. Lots of election results to talk about today, and I do believe we have a Truman's Town Hall exclusive. That's right. Something happened in the city of Huber Heights. I believe I put in a public records request. Hopefully we'll have that back soon. I'll discuss it a little later, but I think it's interesting. I think it is a telling piece of the election results from the city of Huber Heights. Now, it'll get spun. It'll get sugar sprinkled on it. All kinds of good stuff's going to happen, but it's very telling when the first thing that comes out of this election is a resignation. Oh, what could it be? What could it be? We'll talk about that here in a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about election results. Now, we're not going to talk much about the national elections. I know there was a big governor's race in Virginia. I know there was a big governor's race in New Jersey, and that's great. That's great. But we live in Ohio, or I live in Ohio, and right now I'm going to talk a little bit about Ohio and generally my neck of the woods. Greene County, Montgomery County, Beaver Creek, Huber Heights. Not many people came out to vote. Yes, Beaver Creek had 3 times the amount of people that voted in their election that voted in the Huber Heights election. However, it was still a abysmal, a low turnout in both districts. Now, I was paying attention to my school board here in Beaver Creek because it seems pretty liberal already. Very liberal. Okay? A lot of times schools seem liberal, right? And it got a lot more liberal after this election. So the big issue here is mandates in Beaver Creek. Lots of folks talking about mandates, mask mandates, and vaccine mandates. Well, the Dayton Daily News put out that Beaver Creek had the most mask exemption requests, and none of them were denied. So that's good. So at least they're able to do that. I don't know how it's going to go forward because one of the folks, 2 of the incumbents were elected, and then there was an open seat, okay? Outside of that there were 2 major candidates running for. One seemed like a conservative and lost, not by much, by a few votes. And the other one is a very uber left candidate. His name is Dr. Carl Fisher, and he won the election. Seems like a very lefty. Seems like one of those lefty types. He loves mandates, loves them, thinks it helps, thinks it's going to protect our children. Well, it's not. But anyway, so before this election, I felt compelled to go up and speak at our school board here in Beaver Creek. I had to do it. I'm going to stand up. And there's some residents here that we're probably going to get together and a little more and organize, because there's folks in this town of Beaver Creek. We don't want our schools to be turned into some of the things that some of these folks had run on. I mean, straight up socialism, if I can be blunt. That's where we're at. It's either far left or middle of the road conservative, right? At least that's how I see it. Anyway, so I went up to the school board recently. I think it was like a week or 2 ago, and I said this.
Madam President, Board, Superintendent Otten, thank you for
the time to speak, I would like to begin by saying my family chose to live in this district because of the school system. So the current members of this board are in part responsible for the success of this district and those of us who have flocked to Beaver Creek to enjoy a school system that provides a great education for our children. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the amazing teachers, staff, and transportation employees. Thank you all. Today, however, I would like to express my concern with mandates. Currently, this board has issued a mandate for all of our children. Lots of explanations have been given to support mask mandates. As we all understand, scientific data can be used in a myriad of directions to sell a point either way. Many of us are already solidified in our views, understandably so. However, you are those who are charged to make the ultimate decisions. You have made those decisions. With that, I would like to ask you to reverse the decision and lift the current mask mandates. Why? Because you and I know they simply don't impact our students. A recent story printed in the Dayton Daily News proves my point. From the reporting, Beaver Creek had the most mask exemption requests, and not one was denied. Ms. Regano, you recently posted on your Facebook page a picture of yourself and another gentleman who spoke at the high school. You were indoors, not wearing a mask, and you weren't social distant. You yourselves have broken the rules of the government agencies this board has cited for making and masking our children. If you are going to choose to go maskless yourselves, knowing you are at a higher risk category, why mask children who by all statistics are not vulnerable? Children get sick. They are resilient and recover. They recover from the flu, from the cold, and yes, from COVID-19. They build needed antibodies that help them develop into strong, healthy adults. So I ask again, please lift the mandates now for the health of our children. Thank you. Okay, so somewhere I'm on a FBI watch list because I spoke out, and I laugh because I don't care. I live a boring life. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I make sure of that. So, if I utilize the First Amendment, which I'm going to do a lot, oh man, it's going to be a lot more here on this podcast. I'm going to try to organize some folks here in our city of Beaver Creek because we lost. I say the good guys lost, those who have common sense, and not just conservatives, but folks who say, you know what, these mask mandates for kids are stupid, because they are. Kids aren't vulnerable. Let's be honest. They recover. They're resilient. Yes, children have died. Lots of people have died. And there's a lot of things we can go down, and I would love to go down the road of COVID right now, but we're going to stick on election results and things like that for things that we talk about here. Beaver Creek, Ohio, Huber Heights. So we're screwed here in Beaver Creek with our school board, at least for the next couple years. Hopefully we can regroup and organize and come back stronger next time. That's what it's all about. Now, Huber Heights. I honestly didn't think that election was going to go like that, but with lower voter turnout, incumbents do tend to win. Here on this podcast, I dubbed Mayor Gore Mayor 1 term, and it turns out he's actually Mayor 2 terms now. That's okay. Congratulations. No hard feelings. I mean, that's what the voters chose. They want money being spent like it's water. They want more houses, apartments stacked up on each other, more land, annexations. They want all that stuff. That's fine. At least those who voted. The ones who didn't just simply don't care, but they don't get to complain. So if you're listening to this podcast and you didn't vote, I don't care. You had absentee ballot, you had early voting, and you had election day, and you didn't vote. So you don't get to say a doggone word about anyone, about anything. You don't get to do that if you don't vote. Because now the city of Huber Heights, they're going to collect your tax money. Well, I get to talk because I pay tax. Go ahead. But you should have went out and voted. Yeah. It was like the liberal takeover of Huber Heights and Beaver Creek. I thought I was getting away from that. I didn't get away. In other parts, I think it's worse. At least the school board. Now, the schools are good. They ranked, I think, 9th in the area schools. Bethel was just below them. So we were going to move to Carriage Trails, but we ended up moving here. So we got just a slightly better school district. Way better than Huber Heights City School District. But that's really the reason we came out here was the schools, right? Because I love Huber Heights. I would love to be involved in Huber Heights, trying to do things and all that good stuff. But anyway, so you had Mayor Gore won. Nancy Burge won the at-large over Richard Shaw. You had Kate Baker won over Frank Wiley, who Frank was on this podcast. Anita Kitchen, who was on this podcast, won over Vincent King. So that was good. With the folks that we had on this podcast, we're 50-50. We're 50-50. I'll take that. I put out there. I was the only one making a prediction. I said mayor one term, and I put like a little post. I said, hey, get out and vote. As a joke, it was all tongue in cheek. It was a joke. But I put it out there like it's earlier in the day, and then somebody on Mayor Gore's little clicky team posted over. I laughed at it. It was funny. And he posted it over on Brick City Town Hall, says no, or ×2 or something. I don't know. I don't know if these folks know how to speak English, but anyway, yeah. And then somebody said, well, you got to eat your words now, Truman. Yes. Yes, I do. I didn't get that one right. This is why, and I wrote something to the effect, this is why I don't gamble. Because I think, in my head, I'm like, don't you want a little more change? When I grew up in Huber Heights was a small town feel. Everything I thought was great. Now they're just building it up, just, hey, let's put something there. Hey, let's put something there. Hey, let's buy this land. I mean, it's going to catch up to them, that city council. It's going to catch up to them. I think it may have already caught up to them. I think tonight because they know that, hey, I'm just going to say it. Let's talk about it for a minute. I have a source. I'm not confirming this yet, not until I receive my public records request, PRR. I'm not confirming this, so don't take this for what it is. I'm just talking about sources, right? We can report on sources. I've had several sources confirm to me that the city's interim city manager has put in his resignation. Bombshell exclusive, I think. Day after an election, the interim city manager resigns. Bombshell revelation. More to come on this, but I'm going to give you my opinion because this is Truman's Town Hall. First, if, and I emphasize the if, this is true, I wish the best going forward for Mr. Falkowski. He was a straight shooter. When I was involved with the Huber Heights Veterans Project, he always shot me straight. And we took a lot of his recommendations because he was a smart dude and a fair dude. And I hate to see him go because he is one of the fairest folks that I've spoke to in city government, to be honest. So I hate to see him go. He was one of the anchors up there, I think, I was hoping he would take on the city manager position. What I think is it doesn't really pan out much anymore because people, I don't know. It's a wild world these days. So if he goes, that leaves, I don't know. I hope someone else steps up that's honest and that is a straight shooter and that will not allow certain politicians to sway them in a certain direction. I thought the city manager before Scott, I thought he was a shyster. That's just me. That's just my opinion. I don't know. Maybe not. He was not a straight shooter. I know that. He was not a nice dude. Strange looking fella too. I think he had that little man syndrome. I don't know. You ever know somebody who's not a very big person and they get into law enforcement and then they're a tough guy? I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I got sources. I've talked to several different sources that yes, the interim city manager put in his resignation on November 3rd, the day after the election. Obviously, he didn't like the results. What didn't he like? My guess is they will put a NDA clause on him, non-disclosure. He won't be able to talk about it going forward. Boy, I hope they don't, but I'm sure they will. And they'll try to push this under the rug, like, oh, well, he was already looking for another position somewhere. He wasn't going to stick it. Yeah, they're going to spin it, guys, like they spin everything. You guys know. If you listen to this podcast, you know. But more people have to listen to this podcast. More people have to understand what's going on in order to make better choices. Folks have to get out and vote. Anyway, so what was I talking about? I get off track a little bit. So Scott's going to go, maybe, if. I'll get my public records request back here soon, hopefully, and it'll be official. I'm sure something will come out because I put in a PRR. There'll be a post like, hey, there was a PRR and it was diabolical. And no, I just asked, hey, is this true? I just want to know for sure. Is this true? I heard it through sources, so I want to know it's true. And I'm telling you guys that I heard it through sources because I think you want to know if it's true or not. Day after an election, city manager resigns. That's pretty telling. It's like, okay, I'm not going to be able to work with these folks. I'm out of here. Hello? No, that's the other side. No, that's not how it is. Okay, then why didn't he put it in before wake up. So also, in other news, both Richard Shaw and Glenn Otto, after their races, after they lost, and I've been there. I lost elections. It sucks. They put out there, hey, I promised everyone, both of them did. I promised everyone that we would run 2 times or whatever, and we're out of here. Or run until they lost. Well, they lost. So they're going to finish up their 2 years, and they're gone. They're out of here. Self-derived term limits. I like it. I wish, hopefully, they can get term limits done before they leave, but when you got the council that you got, that ain't going to happen. They're not going to provide term limits. The power and control is in their hands. Why these small town politicians take on these egos? It really only says one thing about themselves. They're small people. If they have to micromanage everything and they have to be in control of everything and, derive this, almighty power feeling, that says a lot about their character. And I've met a lot of these folks. I've never met Kate Baker, but she doesn't seem very bright to me. Maybe obviously she did to folks in Ward 3, unfortunately, but hey, good luck with that. You had a great choice with Frank Wiley. I think so. He was a bright dude, good, upstanding, conservative gentleman who would have worked hard for the people of Ward 3. Anita Kitchen won. That's awesome. I think she'll be a good voice, a good independent voice. She ran with Glenn, Richard, Frank, Naomi, if I say her name right, yeah, she ran with all those folks. But I think Anita will be a good independent voice. You've had a dead voice on the council in Ward 4 for 4 years. I talked to someone the other day, and I was telling them about how Andy Hill lied to me. Said, oh, yeah, I'm going to vote with you, and then didn't. And then tried to back. They said, yes, the guy BS me too. Well, makes sense. Things are starting to fall into place. Things will eventually get out there, but the point is, people aren't going to know who's the honest person in the position and who's not. Who's willing to do whatever it takes to maintain power and control of a little city like Huber Heights. There's a lot of people. It's insane to me why that happens. I think that resignation, if it's true, will say a lot. Hopefully people will wake up and go, ding, 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 light bulb, something is bad here, something stinks in Denmark, but I doubt it. There's a lot of apathy out there. So if Glenn and Richard go away in 2 years, hopefully they muster up the courage and just really give it to them these next couple of years and really bring out and bring to light what is actually happening in government. You can't play nice guy. Not with Team Heights. You cannot play nice guy with these folks. If you're a politician, they play to win. They certainly do. And low voter turnout is always going to fall into the benefit. So if you're upset about the election results, I think many people are, especially when you get resignations, maybe, if, right? We said that. Then you got to do something about it. You have to organize. You have to talk to your neighbors. Hey, did you vote? No. Why not? We got to vote, buddy. Let's crush these beers and let's talk about voting. Let's drink this coffee and talk about voting. Get your neighbor, get your wife, get your adult son, daughter. You got to get people to the polls. If you don't get people to the polls, then you're just going to be sitting with whatever. And now, folks, especially when you vote in 3 incumbents, they go back to the dais and say, hey, we can do what we want because the city said we are on the right track. So their ego is up. What they want to do, they'll just do it. And I think the road you guys are on now in Huber Heights, I don't think it's a good road. There's a lot of people that love it. If you love a lot of houses and you love traffic and you love water mains breaking everywhere and you love spending money like a Democrat with an open credit card, go for it. Keep on electing these folks. So here's what I'm going to be doing here in Beaver Creek. I got some folks I've been talking to because we got to look at, and I'm in Beaver Creek Township, so it's, small time stuff. There's not a lot of crazy stuff that we have to totally pay attention to in the township government with our trustees. They're doing a pretty good job. But what I'm going to be doing is organizing with local citizens. And we're going to try to figure out a way to take back this school board. There's another election coming up. We need to find candidates who are smart, who know the laws, who know how to be a member of a school board, and who is willing to fight and work really hard. Get in there. Working at PTO meetings, right? The mayor works at the city schools in Huber Heights. If you're going to, this just a little hint to anyone who plans on running next time. If you're going to run, volunteer for your PTO in Huber Heights. Be at every event you can. Talk with the parents. Hey, give them your name. Show people what you're doing. Get out there now. Yeah, take the holidays off, but get out there. Come the first of the year, get out there. Show people who you are. All right? That's smart. That's real smart. Smart of the mayor to be working at the schools and talking to people and knowing different students and talking to their parents on parent-teacher conferences. Oh, well, he's a great teacher. He may be. I don't know. I never sat in his class. But I do love government. I think that'd be a fun class to teach. Anyway, so yeah, you have to get out there. You have to be known if you are going to run for I said school board because that's what I'm thinking about, but for council or school board. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be looking for some folks here in Beaver Creek, talking with, whoever. I may get out there and find out that the direction I want our schools to go is not the direction the majority want. I don't think it is right now, though. Because the vote here in my town, Beaver Creek, was so close. Anyway, so you're going to be adding Anita Kitchen taking over for Andy Hill, who was just taking up space on that dais anyway. The guy never brought anything. What a disappointment. What a disappointment that he was. Listen to our podcast number 55, Disappointed, and it'll explain all of it to you. All right. What else we got? Let's take a little break and listen to this.
Enemy. One that is antagonistic to another. Something harmful or deadly. For those with eyes to see, humanity is currently under attack by an antagonistic and deadly foe. An enemy that must hide in the shadows to survive. But there is always a money trail, and money is their only real power. So to find the real enemy, we must follow the money. In the documentary Monopoly, Who Owns the World, Tim Gielen does an excellent job of doing this. While there appears to be hundreds of independent companies producing food, they are practically all owned by the same small group of companies. These companies are controlled by their top shareholders, financial institutions such as Berkshire Hathaway, Vanguard, BlackRock, and State Street. This is also who owns Silicon Valley, big tech, the airline industry, the steel industry, agriculture, the textile and clothing industry, both the oil and solar panel industry, tobacco, alcohol, pharmaceutical, electronics, and banking. Just about everything in today's modern world is owned and controlled by these same financial institutions, who are also invested in each other, forming a pyramid of financial power topped by BlackRock and Vanguard. BlackRock loans money to the Federal Reserve Bank, advises them, and developed their software system. BlackRock itself is owned by Vanguard, and Vanguard, sitting on top of the world pyramid, keeps its shareholders private. But we know that the majority of wealth has been accumulated by inheritance and monopoly, and the same few families have owned most of the world for generations. Families such as Rothschild, Rockefeller, DuPont, Morgan, and Bush. Operating through nonprofit foundations, these unelected families are able to rule over the world like kings. This is the way it has always been, whether it be via pharaoh, royalty, papal supremacy, dictator, or investment banker. Mankind has always been managed by the rich and powerful. Freedom is a dream yet to be fully realized in this world. After the American Revolution, our forefathers gave us the tools to realize this dream of self-governance in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Tools that will be stripped away unless mankind decides to stand and face their enemy.
Here we need a vast military-style campaign to marshal the strength of the global private sector. With trillions at its disposal, far beyond global GDP, and with the greatest respect, beyond even the governments of the world's leaders, it offers the only real prospect of achieving fundamental economic transition.
For Infowars.com, this is Greg Reese.
Well, I play that to say this. Local government is small potatoes compared to the rest of the world. However, local government implements all of this. Have you went to the grocery store and realized I'm paying more for groceries? You probably have. Have you went to the gas station and said, I'm paying more for gas? You probably have. Well, while we are paying more for groceries and gas, local governments are going to pay more for concrete and water piping. And in turn, when you're paying more for that, you're going to pay more for labor. It will all trickle down. And when you have governments that are overspending, in our view, there may come a time where your local government is running a deficit, wherever you may be. I know somebody's going to say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory that Matt just played. That's from that InfoWars, folks. It is. There's some stuff on there where you're like, I don't know if that's going to, but there's a lot of things when you look into it, it makes sense. Some of it is a little exaggerated. I agree. There's a lot of things that are exaggerated. I didn't think 9/11 would ever happen, though, but it did. We're going to talk in later episodes about China invading Taiwan. I really think that's going to happen. I mean, my predictions suck right now. But at least for elected officials, I thought folks were going to turn out for this election. They didn't. Not really know what to say. Is it the politicians' fault? Is it the city's fault? Is it our fault for not, dragging our neighbors to the polls? I mean, I would say it's a collective of all that. But we're going to be, I think we are in dire times. I think we need to start paying attention to certain things. I truly believe when a politician says never let a crisis go to waste, I believe they mean that. And right now, the pandemic crisis, I don't believe they're letting that go to waste. You look around, you look at Australia, you look at Canada, and you see the draconian tactics being used there. Socialist tactics being used there. Heck, this is a long podcast. Let's listen to this. I can do whatever I want. This is my podcast. You guys can turn it off or you can listen, but I think this is important. Very important.
In 1894, Nicholas II became ruler of a Russian empire that stretched from the Baltic to the Pacific, inhabited by 126 million people from 194 ethnic groups. It was a country in which workers and peasants lived in poverty and hardship, while Russia's elite, its imperial family and aristocracy, lived lives of gilded luxury. There was a long history of struggle in Russia against the injustices of the system. And in 1905, a revolution forced the Tsar to allow the creation of a State Duma, or National Assembly. But its power was limited, and the compromise pleased neither the Tsar nor the reformers. In 1914, this divided empire was plunged into fresh crisis by World War. World War I was a disaster for Tsarist Russia. At the front, the country suffered a series of devastating defeats, while at home there were food shortages and economic chaos. The Tsar was held responsible for the crisis. After all, he was now the army's commander-in-chief, and he was standing in the way of government reform. His German-born wife, Empress Alexandra, was even thought to be supporting Germany, while the entire family was said to have fallen under the spell of a Siberian mystic and faith healer, Grigori Rasputin. In December 1916, Rasputin was murdered by Russian aristocrats, possibly with the help of British secret agents, both groups determined to end his influence over the Tsar. But in the eyes of many, the damage had already been done. On the 23rd of February 1917, thousands of women took to the streets of the Russian capital Petrograd, to mark International Women's Day and protest over bread shortages. The next day, they were joined on the streets by workers and students carrying placards that read, "Down with the Tsar." Troops ordered to put down the disorder mutinied and joined the protesters instead. Tsarist officials were arrested. Prisons and police stations were attacked. Emblems of Tsarist rule smashed and burned. The government had lost control of the capital. The Tsar was told by his ministers that order could only be restored and Russia saved from military defeat if he gave up power. So, on the 2nd of March, Nicholas agreed to abdicate. In just 10 days, 300 years of Romanov rule had come to an end. The February Revolution had been remarkably swift and bloodless, and hopes were now high for the creation of a more democratic, more just Russian state. Members of the State Duma, the National Assembly, had formed a provisional government, which was to hold power until a constituent assembly was elected, to give Russia a new constitution. But in reality, the provisional government shared power with the Petrograd Soviet, a council elected by workers and soldiers that controlled the capital's troops, transport, and communications. The Petrograd Soviet, dominated by the Socialist Revolutionary Party and the Marxist Menshevik Party, was much more radical than the provisional government. Yet it supported the government's decision to continue the war and honor the commitments that Russia had made to the Allies. It was a fateful decision that ultimately played into the hands of one of the smaller parties, the Bolsheviks. Their leader, Vladimir Lenin, recently returned from 16 years in exile, bitterly opposed the imperialist war. He also demanded the immediate redistribution of land from rich landowners to peasants, and the transfer of power from the bourgeois provisional government to the people's soviets or councils that were springing up across Russia. The Bolshevik program was summed up in a simple slogan: bread, peace, and land. And as Russia's economic and military crisis deepened, its appeal to the masses grew and grew. In June, a new Russian military offensive ended in disaster, with 400,000 Russian casualties, massive desertions, and the collapse of army morale and discipline. In July, soldiers and sailors in Petrograd mutinied. They were joined in the streets by workers with Bolshevik support. But troops loyal to the provisional government opened fire on the protesters and dispersed the crowds. A police crackdown followed, leading to the arrest of several Bolshevik leaders, including Leon Trotsky, while Lenin, with the help of Joseph Stalin, fled to Finland, traveling with forged papers under the name of Konstantin Ivanov. A socialist and stirring orator named Alexander Kerensky became Russia's new prime minister and was hailed as the man who would save Russia from anarchy. The army's commander-in-chief, General Kornilov, believed Russia's war effort was being undermined by chaos at home and deliberately sabotaged by men like Lenin, whom he declared a German spy. So in August, he ordered his men to march on Petrograd to restore order. Bolsheviks played a leading role in the city's defense against this attempted military coup. Their most brilliant organizer, Leon Trotsky, was released from prison and sent armed Bolshevik militias, the Red Guards, to defend key points in the city. Strikes by railway workers, many of them Bolshevik supporters, prevented Kornilov from moving his men by rail, and his soldiers began to switch sides or simply go home. The Kornilov affair cast the Bolsheviks as saviors of the revolution. And by the end of September, they'd gained a majority in the Petrograd Soviet. In October, Lenin decided the time had come. He secretly returned from Finland to Petrograd and began preparing to seize power. On the 25th of October, the Bolsheviks made their move. Red Guards and loyal troops seized key points around the capital, and that night they stormed the Provisional Government's headquarters at the Winter Palace, an event later immortalized by Bolshevik propaganda and the great Soviet filmmaker Sergei Eisenstein. Kerensky fled the city at the last moment, narrowly avoiding capture. And the next day, at the Second All-Russian Congress of Soviets, Lenin announced the overthrow of the Provisional Government. The following months saw the Bolsheviks consolidate their hold on power, while fighting a brutal civil war against counter-revolutionary or White Russian forces who had foreign support. Some whites hoped to put Tsar Nicholas back on the throne. After his abdication, Nicholas and his family had been held under guard at Tsarskoye Selo, outside Petrograd, where they occupied themselves with gardening and other diversions. In summer 1917, the family was sent to Tobolsk in Siberia, where they lived under house arrest in the governor's mansion. The following spring, the Bolsheviks had the family moved to Yekaterinburg. In July 1918, as white forces approached the city, Bolshevik soldiers gathered the whole family in a cellar. The Tsar, his wife, their son Alexei, their 4 daughters, Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, as well as 4 servants, and executed them all. Russia's civil war was one of the 20th century's most devastating events. An estimated 2 million soldiers lost their lives, while a typhus epidemic and famine claimed the lives of a further 9 million civilians. By the end of 1921, the Bolsheviks had emerged victorious, and under Lenin's determined and uncompromising leadership, set about building a new socialist order. The Soviet Union, created in 1922, emerged as a world superpower following the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. But it would always remain a single-party state, where all opposition or dissent was ruthlessly suppressed. Those brief hopes for Russian democracy that flowered amid the euphoria of the February Revolution were extinguished by the Bolshevik October Revolution and put beyond reach for decades to come.
All right. Yes, I know that video was long. That was Epic History's The Russian Revolution of 1917. But I think history is important. We can learn a lot through history. And we're doomed if we repeat it. A lot of talk these days is of socialism. Well, that's been tried. Communism has been tried, and it's failed each and every time. You know what doesn't fail? Freedom. And we're walking away from that here in the United States. And I worry about that. I worry that the sorties that are being flown over China will one day erupt into a full-out war. There are U.S. troops in Taiwan. If they decide to stand with the Taiwanese, if the U.S. decides to stand with the Taiwanese, if that were to happen, and it very well may happen, then that's World War III. I don't want to see that in my time. I don't want to see that in my children's time. But it may happen, and it's important to learn from history. So that's why I played that. Just kind of having fun with this podcast tonight. It's the day after the election, and looking, it kind of seems doom and gloom, but there's things that can be done. Hopefully, folks who are elected will understand that there is another side out there. But if not, if they drill down and say, okay, there's only one side, and it's our side, the ones that were elected, then you'll see that as well. But that gives folks like you and I room to build up and do better next time. Get others out to vote. Voter apathy is the biggest issue we're having today. I really don't know what it's going to take to get folks to the polls, especially on off years. Everybody's concerned about the national elections, and I get it. I'm concerned with those as well. They are important. But you know what the most important election is? The local elections. And folks don't come out to those. Why? Talk to your neighbors. Why don't you go out? Why didn't you? I don't know. We have to. Do you realize what is at stake? Our infrastructure is at stake. Our local infrastructure. The basic city services. The basic education that our children receive at schools, public schools, is at stake. Do we have to pull our kids out of public schools and put them in private schools or do homeschooling? Maybe we do. Will that wake districts up? No, they'll just continue on educating those that come to school. I think it's important to politically fight for what you believe in and try to change the system from within, and not allow a system to go far left or far right for that matter. I don't want far left. I don't want far right. I want, something that we can all compromise to. I don't want anyone hurt. I believe that we have to teach our kids that every individual person matters, that we have to treat each other with respect and dignity. I truly believe that. But I don't believe we have to do that and make our own selves feel bad about doing that. Like, no. I got a few podcasts planned coming forward. One I think you guys will all enjoy. One I think that is very interesting. And we're going to keep following different news stories. We're going to continue following what's happening around the world. We're going to continue following the pandemic and COVID-19. We're going to continue following local issues such as school boards, local governments, what actually happened with the resignation, the possible resignation of the interim city manager. We'll follow these things. And remember, where you heard it first, here on Truman's Town Hall. Thank you for downloading. Thank you for sharing this episode. Please share the episode. If you have ideas, send them to me at truepodcast@gmail.com. If you want to come on the podcast and have a discussion, I'm open. We got plenty of time to talk about things coming up. I love having a good conversation, even if you disagree with me. We'll have a discussion. I like doing discussions in public because I think it's important. Anyway, truepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Thanks for downloading. And I will talk to you soon.